Why does letting go sometimes feel nearly impossible? Picture this. You're lying awake, replaying an old heartbreak or grudge in your mind. Your chest tightens at every reminder. Logically, you know holding on hurts. It's been called emotional baggage for a reason. Yet, some part of you just can't release it. In this video, we'll explore why letting go is so hard and how science shows it's also so necessary. We'll journey through the psychology and neuroscience of letting go, uncovering what's happening in your brain when you cling to the past and how you can rewire those patterns for good. We'll cover a lot. First, we'll define what letting go actually means in scientific terms. And, spoiler, it's not simply getting over it. We'll see how it involves active brain processes, like updating how a memory is stored, reappraising how we think about it, and even reshaping our sense of identity. Next, we'll dive into why it's so difficult, from primal brain circuits that latch on to fear and pain, to habit loops, and even cognitive traps, like the sunk cost fallacy, that keep us stuck. Then we'll outline a science-backed path to genuinely let go, step by step, a kind of toolkit drawn from psychology research and therapy techniques. This includes practical stages like becoming aware of your feelings, processing them, reframing your thoughts, decentering from the pain, making real behavior changes, and updating your identity and meaning in life. We'll also bust some popular myths, like why just move on or doing a one-time ritual often doesn't work, and clarify the difference between suppressing emotions versus truly releasing them. Finally, we'll apply all this to real-life situations: romantic heartbreak, long-held grudges, deep shame, perfectionism, even letting go of old goals or identities. For each, we'll give concrete mini practices. Think journaling prompts, 5-minute mindfulness techniques, or mental exercises that you can try right away. Ready to dive in? Let's start by unpacking what letting go really means. Part 1. What does letting go actually mean? We hear the phrase, let it go, all the time. But in scientific terms, what's actually happening when we truly let go of emotional pain or a past experience? It turns out, letting go isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending you weren't hurt. It's an active process, almost like emotional alchemy that changes how our memories and emotions affect us. Psychologists and neuroscientists have identified several mechanisms behind real letting go. Let's break them down. Memory reconsolidation, updating emotional memories. Our memories aren't fixed like a photograph. Every time we recall a memory, it briefly becomes flexible, a window when it can be updated before it's stored again. Letting go often taps into this process. If a memory carries intense pain or fear, bringing it to mind in a safe context and introducing new information can rewrite its emotional charge. In essence, the brain resaves the memory with a lighter emotional weight. You'll still remember the event, but it won't hijack you with the same intensity as before. This is huge for healing trauma or deep wounds. It's like editing the code of a program it stops triggering errors. For example, a person who was in a bad car accident may, through therapy, recall the event while simultaneously experiencing safety and control in the present. This mismatch can overwrite the terror associated with driving. Memory reconsolidation is essentially the brain's built-in mechanism for letting go of learned fear by updating memory with new meaning. Extinction, unlearning fear responses. Related to reconsolidation is the idea of extinction, which comes from behavioral neuroscience. When we let go of a fear or hurt, we often undergo a process similar to what therapists use in exposure therapy, gradually teaching the brain that the trigger is no longer dangerous. For instance, say you're holding on to anxiety after a betrayal. Your brain has learned to see reminders of that person or similar situations as threats. Through gentle, repeated exposure to reminders without negative outcomes, maybe you visit a place you used to go with your ex and nothing bad happens, or you form new positive associations. The brain's alarm circuits quiet down as the prefrontal cortex sends signals of safety, and new, safe memories form in the hippocampus. Essentially, you're not erasing the old memory, but you're creating a new memory of safety that overrides the fear response. Letting go often means your brain has extinguished the old reaction, like a fire that's finally died down because it ran out of fuel. Cognitive reappraisal, changing the story. Another core aspect of letting go is cognitive reappraisal, a fancy term for rethinking the meaning of what happened. If memory reconsolidation is editing the emotional file, reappraisal is editing the interpretation of that file. When you engage in reappraisal, you deliberately look at the situation from a new angle, perhaps a more compassionate or realistic perspective. For example, instead of replaying, "I was wronged because I wasn't good enough," you might reframe it to, "That person was acting out of their own fear or pain. It wasn't about me." This kind of shift can diffuse the emotional charge of the memory. Neurologically, reappraisal activates regions of the prefrontal cortex, our brain's rational, executive centers, which then calm down activity in the amygdala, the emotional center. One fMRI study found that people reinterpreted interpersonal conflicts in a more benign way. Their amygdala response decreased significantly thanks to these prefrontal rewirings. So, letting go often involves this mental reframing. You're not changing what happened, but you're changing the story you tell yourself about it. In doing so, you reclaim power over the narrative, and your emotions follow suit. Experiential acceptance, allowing emotions to flow. Paradoxically, a big part of letting go is stopping the fight against your own feelings. Psychologists call this acceptance, specifically experiential acceptance of emotions. It means allowing yourself to feel grief, anger, or hurt without judgment or suppression. It might sound counterintuitive. Wait, to let go of pain, I should embrace the pain? In a sense, yes, briefly and safely. Research shows that when we suppress emotions, like, "I'm fine, it's fine, I'm just not going to think about it," the distress doesn't actually disappear. In fact, suppression can backfire. Studies found that deliberately pushing down feelings spikes physiological stress, heart rate, blood pressure, sweat response, even as we act calm. The feelings go underground into the body, often resurfacing as insomnia, headaches, muscle tension, or other health issues. Acceptance, on the other hand, has the opposite effect. Simply naming an emotion, like, "I feel hurt and that's okay for now," can reduce its grip. Brain imaging studies show that affect labeling, putting feelings into words, activates the brain's ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala activity, literally calming the emotional alarm. Psychologist Dan Siegel famously phrases this as "name it to tame it." By acknowledging the emotion instead of denying it, we give the brain a chance to process and eventually release it. One study noted that people practicing acceptance had faster emotional recovery from negative experiences. So, counterintuitively, feeling the feelings, in a safe, mindful way, is part of letting them go. Think of it as letting the wave wash through you, rather than resisting it. The wave passes, and you're still there. Forgiveness, releasing resentment, and engaging empathy. Letting go often involves forgiveness, whether it's forgiving someone else or forgiving oneself. Now, forgiveness in psychology doesn't mean condoning what happened or forgetting it. It means releasing the chronic resentment and bitterness so it no longer poisons you. Scientifically, forgiveness is powerful. Research summarized by UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center describes forgiveness as releasing the grip of resentment and finding empathy, which activates positive emotional processes. When we forgive, we often engage brain networks for understanding others. For example, the same circuits that allow us to mentalize or imagine someone else's perspective come online. This shift can strengthen emotional regulation circuits as well. In practical terms, forgiveness might look like deliberately cultivating a bit of empathy for the person who hurt you, recognizing their humanity or their own flaws without excusing the harm. Experiments have shown that even a brief forgiveness imagery exercise, where participants imagine truly forgiving someone, led to reduced anger, less rumination, and even lower cortisol, a stress hormone, compared to when they imagined revenge. Forgiveness, in essence, is an emotional release valve. It's saying, I choose not to carry this anger anymore. The result is often relief, sometimes described as feeling lighter or unburdened when that weight of resentment is put down. In our Letting Go toolkit, forgiveness is one of the most profound tools, especially for relational pain. Identity transformation, updating your self-story. Finally, letting go often entails a change in identity or personal narrative. This is a fascinating aspect we don't often think about. Sometimes we hold on to pain because it has become part of who we are. If I've seen myself as the betrayed one or the person who failed at X, letting go can feel like losing a piece of identity or admitting that chapter is over. But in healthy letting go, we update our identity. We realize we are not our trauma, not our loss, not our past. Psychologists talk about concepts like self-distancing or decentering, more on that soon, which allow us to see our experiences as parts of our story, not the defining whole. In practice, this might mean shifting from identifying as a victim of some event to identifying as a survivor, or simply as a person who has grown from it. It can also mean redefining your values and who you want to be going forward, independent of that old attachment. A striking quote from a neuroscientist captures this. After heartbreak or loss, a person may have thousands of neural circuits devoted to the lost person, and each of these has to be brought up and reconstructed to take into account the person's absence. In other words, piece by piece, we rebuild our inner world without that past defining it. Letting go could involve creating a new narrative like, I am someone who learned strength from this, rather than, I am someone permanently broken by this. We'll delve more into identity in Part 3 and Part 5, but it's important to know from the outset, true letting go often changes how we see ourselves, for the better. It's like shedding an old skin. It can feel scary, that old identity was familiar after all, but it allows for new growth. So to sum up, what is letting go? It's not just one thing. It's a collection of interrelated brain and mind changes. You update the memory so it no longer stings. You reinterpret the meaning of what happened. You allow yourself to feel and then release the emotion. You perhaps forgive and find empathy. And you emerge with a new perspective on yourself and the world. If we use a metaphor, letting go is like upgrading your mental software. The old program, the grudge, the heartbreak, the regret, was full of bugs. It kept throwing errors, pain, anger every time it ran. Through reconsolidation and reappraisal, you patch the code. Through acceptance and forgiveness, you clear out the malware that was slowing everything down. And through identity change, you might even install a whole new app, a new way of defining yourself that isn't tied to that old program. The end result? The next time you encounter a trigger that used to crash your system, nothing, or much less happens. The memory has been defanged, the emotional charge diffused. That is letting go. Not forgetting, but remembering without the torment. But if it's so straightforward to describe, why is it not straightforward to do? That brings us to the next crucial topic, why our brains and psyches find it so hard to let go in the first place.